Welcome everybody back to my channel. My name's Allie and this is Heart and Soul Connected, and I'm so happy to be with you. This tape has been pre-recorded, just so you know. Please leave any kind of comments in the comments section. I'd love to hear from you. And this particular topic that I'm going to talk about today is a part one of what I believe is something that I have come to find as an aha experience in my own life, and perhaps you will find in yours. I have to have the caveat here that perhaps if you did not live in the United States, Canada, or England at the time, maybe even Australia, you may not have experienced life in the exact same way as we did. But add your own spin to this, because I think it really does speak to the generation known as Generation Jones, which is not in the boomer mix. It is 1954 to 1965, where we were on the fringes. We were on the fringes of sandwiched between two generations. And it can be said that Keeping Up with the Joneses is what it was named after. And of course, many of us remember people living exactly like that. If your neighbor had a pool, you wanted a pool. If he got a new car, you wanted a new car. But I want to talk a little bit more about the cultural influences of our time. And in part two, talk about some personal observations and feelings surrounding some of the areas of this topic. So to begin with, if you were lucky, you were able to go to the movie theater. And in that time period, it probably cost you 50 to 75 cents to go to the movies. You might have gone only on Saturdays and not on Sundays and other days, but you probably eventually also went to the drive-in movie. Now, that doesn't mean your brother or sister that were older than you in the boomer generation did not do this, but you remember the smell of cigarette smoke in there. You remember the smell of vinyl for records that played. And you remember some of the other things that occurred during that time period that we were too young to participate in, such as Woodstock, and later were on the fringes of the MTV generation. So this speaks to that group of people who grew up and remember television, music, and other popular culture things from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and how those influenced their lives. So picture 1983, a boy that's born in 1958, pays $5 at that time, grabs popcorn, and in one weekend mainlines Return of the Jedi, Flashdance, and The Outsiders all at once. By prom night, he'd already survived the gas lines and Watergate and 3 recessions. Critics called the decade shallow. 38 million Jones kids called it Tuesday. They were quietly installing the cultural OS the planet still boots up every morning. It's our revenge here. Every algorithm you love is basically rating our yearbooks. Now, that may not consistently happen as time goes on, but there is an awful lot of music that came out, an awful lot of movies that came out, an awful lot of popular culture ideas that came out, and some scandals as well during that time period. So PG-13, by the way, did not exist until 1984. You may not have been aware of that. So a 10-year-old in 1975 could wander into a movie like Dog Day Afternoon, hear Al Pacino scream Attica, and walk out changed, not scarred. Scorsese, Coppola, Friedkin shot on real streets with bad sound and worse attitudes. Messages were cops lie, bank rot, anti-heroes just admit it, and today's prestige gray zone, handheld panic, fluorescent doom, still mails a love letter to 1976. We had a lot come out then. By August 1st, 1981, cable boxes hiccuped, and the Buggles announced the execution of the radio star. There were other bands who also brought in this idea, but Jones was between the ages then of 16 and 27 Very influential times for the Generation Jones people. Old enough to realize image was now also an instrument. It was a way of viewing the song. It was a way of being at the concert without being at the concert, or seeing the song as story. Prior to that, we did not see that. If we were lucky enough to see the bands on Ed Sullivan and some of those other places, they merely lip synced most of the music and did not. And later they may have sung it, but you just saw them standing there and playing the music. There was no story behind it. You, at the time, needed a trench coat, a key guitar, and a wind machine to chart. Madonna, Prince, Duran Duran weren't dropping tracks. They were pitching storyboards. Even every TikTok cut, Marvel Slinger, Neon Stranger Things title is the grandchild to the first synthetic wave. So everything you're seeing now is based on what came before it. And we know that television in and of itself during this period of time, mostly black and white, but becoming color, was the precursor to the television we have now. Then 4 or 5 stations, now multitudes. There was also a mixtape mentality going on. Were you born in 61? Well, your cousin handed you Zeppelin. Your little brother taped I Want a New Drug off FM at midnight. Taste equaled collage. 4 decades later, Spotify's entire job is that same mixtape on internal shuffle. Algorithms don't invent genres. They Xerox the juxtapositions Jones kids made with a pencil and a dual cassette in 1984. We made our own cassettes. I remember my daughter in the 90s making her own CD with music on it. That precursor to that was the Generation Jones mixtapes. Boomers had 3 channels. Gen X had 800. Jones landed exactly when the dial exploded from 12 to 72, but that was later, not earlier in that iteration. They watched the Iran hostage crisis stomp all over Happy Days. They saw MTV, CNN, and then HBO with no commercials wired their brains for channel surfing. Scroll culture, just the remote clicker living rent-free in your thumb. My father beforehand, not a Jen Jones, but having to get up and turn the channel. Oh, ruined everything. And then you had to adjust the channel to make sure that the channel came in right. So last year's top stream shows, perhaps Cobra Kai, Wednesday, Stranger Things, they're all love letters to 1983, folks. Studios aren't nostalgic. They're opportunistic. Jones isn't chasing the youth. It's chasing the deed to the story they wrote first. Every remake is a royalty check to the rest of us. Cash. You'll notice the remakes of all these things. We had also Top Gun. We have all kinds of things that are in the remake process. So Jones watched the moon landing live. I can say that I was 14 when the moon landing happened. I happened to be babysitting my cousin, and we were sitting in a bar down in Cape Cod. Of course, I wasn't 21, but it didn't matter. You could have a Coke in a bar then. They didn't card you. If you were with an adult, they knew you weren't drinking anything. And you could watch TV in a bar. How much fun was that? Not really. Kind of smoky. Anyway, they saw Apollo turned into a museum relic before they could buy a ticket. Big dreams die without maintenance. That's why Patagonia, Airbnb, and other brand name manifest that smell like the 1978 dorm room poster. Apparent authenticity isn't jargon. It's survival code for people who saw institutions promise the moon and then hand them a pink slip. We were in the midst then also of competition culture. Why there was no participation trophies at the time, which were criticized later when some of these Generation Jones people had their own children that were born afterwards. Little League in 1976, there were 2 bats and 1 ball. There wasn't Gatorade. You kept score or you walked home. The crucible baked adults who treat karaoke like Olympic trials and turned cupcakes into Top Chef. Reality TV, Dodgeball with better hair. Absolutely. The bridge from vinyl to virus. When lockdown hit, guess who spun vinyl, baked sourdough, and still nailed Zoom calls? Generation Jones. Yours truly did. They spent some 40 years translating analog childhood into digital paychecks. Every app you disrupt your life with was beta tested by somebody who once programmed a VCR to catch Miami Vice while they were attending a Billy Joel concert. Generation Jones was on the precipice of almost everything, although, of course, things changed and every generation has a contribution. Right now, there's a resurgence in Generation Jones songs, films, and ideas, and we're seeing it in real time. Drop the first album you bought with your own cash in the comments. Let's see how fast the feeds turn into a Tower Records reunion. Mine was the Monkees, 1967. Netflix drops $70 billion a year on content. 70% of that catalog is IP birthed between 1974 and 1987. The generation once told to get real jobs now collects royalties on memories they Xeroxed in study hall. If that's not a quiet, smiling act of revenge, what is? So the binge, the stream, the swipe, the sample, not built by boomers who still brag about Woodstock or Gen X cynics in flannel armor. It was hammered together by kids who split the last sip of 70s grift with the first gulp of the 80s gloss. They're Generation Jones, the middle kid, the kid who finally owns the playing field. The Breakfast Club sample, Nile Rodgers reboot, another neon title card. Go ahead. You're not just being nostalgic. You're paying rent on a world you already built, and the lease never expires. If that doesn't earn a subscribe, I don't know what does. Thank you for spending time with me. Bye, everybody.